What do you think most business owners get totally wrong when it comes to their business, well, the business and their personal finances?
Yeah, so I think there's a few different routes we can go down with that. But I think what it really boils down to is that most people start a business because they're an expert at something. So a builder is an expert at building things and working with their hands. So they start a building business or a construction business. A dentist is a dentist and they start a dental practice. A plumber is a plumber and they start a plumbing business. Someone who's a bit into tech, they're a tech person and they start a tech business. But when you start a business, what nobody tells you before you start it is that you actually have to learn how to run a business. And the thing that drives the business is the numbers.
Okay, Chris Word, and welcome back to the Director First podcast, where I interview leading business minds about subjects that I think you're going to find really interesting. Today, I'm joined by Tom Griffiths. Tom is the main man at the Synergy CFO business. Tom, welcome to the show.
Hi, Chris. Thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Tom, let's go back to the start for you. How did it all start? And what led you into the world of fractional CFO? And tell us more about Synergy.
Yeah, good. So it goes back to my background, which is in finance. So I spent 7 years working at a big American investment bank. End of COVID, I decided essentially it was at the time when everyone was starting to go back to the office. And I thought, if I go back to the office, then, I'm never going to leave. And this was my opportunity to kind of leave and do something a bit more entrepreneurial and have a go at some other things. So I left, didn't know what I was doing at first, but I had a go at a few different businesses that I just wanted to have a go at and see what happened. They weren't going to be my kind of long-term career or anything like that. And at the same time, I was also helping people in my network with just odd bits of consulting relating to helping them with their finances. So business owners, so bits of mergers and acquisitions, bits of fundraising, exit planning, that sort of thing. And so in that process, I realized, firstly, in the businesses that I was starting myself, what I didn't know was how to actually manage things from a numbers perspective, despite having a background in investment banking. And then with these business owners that I was helping with mergers and acquisitions, with fundraising, with exit planning, and all the rest of it, what I realized was that these business owners, whilst they thought they wanted to buy another business or they thought they were ready to sell their business, actually what they lacked was an understanding of kind of what was going on in their own business. And so I then built a process for myself to actually understand the numbers and make decisions based off the numbers, which is obviously what I've been taught in my background in banking. And then also realized that if I could build out this process for other business owners, then I would be able to help them much more than I probably would by helping them acquire another business, where a lot of the time, actually, it can cause more problems than it's worth. So that's what I set out to do. So I built out this process, and it's a very simple process. The ideal outcome of what I do is to help business owners make more money. But that starts with understanding the numbers. So it's understanding the numbers, helping them see what's working and what's not working in their business. And then using that information, we make data-driven decisions to work out what to do next so that we can keep the business healthy, i.e. not run out of cash, and make more money for the business owner. And that's it. And that's what I've been doing since I left JP Morgan.
I wanted to bring it because you was at quite a heavy hitting firm. It was JP Morgan. How long was you there for?
I was there for 7 years.
What was that like?
It was good. I'm really, really glad that I started my career there, and I learned so much. And really everything that I do now with my clients, I learned there. So all of the budgeting, the forecasting, the modeling, and the strategy, and also the process that I actually implemented, I learned it all there. So yeah, really, really grateful that I was given the opportunity to start my career there, and I learned so much from the people that I worked with. But as I said, I had this bug in me that kind of wanted to have a go at something a bit more entrepreneurial and on my own and take a bit of a risk, and that's what led me to leave and start my own thing.
What do you think most business owners get totally wrong when it comes to their business, well, the business and their personal finances?
Yeah, so I think there's a few different routes we can go down with that. But I think what it really boils down to is that most people start a business because they're an expert at something. So a builder is an expert at building things and working with their hands. So they start a building business or a construction business. A dentist is a dentist and they start a dental practice. A plumber is a plumber and they start a plumbing business. Someone who's a bit, into tech, they're a tech person and they start a tech business. But when you start a business, what nobody tells you before you start it is that you actually have to learn how to run a business. And the thing that drives the business is the numbers. And so you have to get good at understanding what's going on in the business. You have to have a way to understand what is going on. And that means understanding the numbers. And so a lot of business owners, like I said, they're experts at their trade or their craft. And that's what led them to start their business. But when you start a business, inevitably things get stressful at times. And what people tend to do is they tend to focus on what they know and what they do best. So the construction person, the builder, he focuses or she focuses on building. Dentist focuses on, seeing more patients, and the numbers get neglected. And so what ends up happening is that business owners most of them don't know how to log into their QuickBooks or their Xero account to see how the business is actually performing. They rely on their accountant to tell them how much profit they made for the prior year. So let's say they made 100K, and this is actually an exact quote from one of my clients. We made 100K last year, but there's none of it in the bank account.
Where's the money?
Exactly, where's the money? And also the year ended 6 months ago. So what's going on now? And so what business owners tend to do is they tend to make decisions based off the only thing that they can see, which is the amount of money in their bank account. And so they'll have an amount of money in the bank account and they'll pay for things or invest in things, whether it be new hires, new marketing, or just keeping up with payroll. But then what happens is that they end up spending last year's corporation tax bill or this period's VAT bill. And then they can't make payroll next month. And then they get themselves into a cash flow crunch and things get really tricky. So I've given you a long-winded answer there, but I think that's that problem is consistent across the board, across industries.
I remember reading a book called The E-Myth by a guy called Michael Gerber. You're not, are you familiar with it?
I've read it, yeah.
Yeah, and it really it helped me massively, that, because it just made so much sense, and that was way before I got into this industry. And obviously now I see, and I think, I don't know what number you put on your post, but the reality is most businesses don't make it. One of the things that you said that was really interesting, and I'm paraphrasing here, but it's most businesses don't need more sales, they need better decisions. What decisions were you talking about there?
Yeah, so what it comes down to is understanding the root cause of any problem that the business is facing. So what I tend to do with my clients is I break the business down into the 16 drivers of the business. So that breaks down into essentially revenue, profit, and then cash flow. And then you've got the drivers of each one of those areas. And so if anyone wants a document that explains all of those 16 areas, then I can send that around. I can also explain that in more detail in a minute if you like.
Please, yeah.
But essentially what it boils down to is very often business owners will focus on generating more sales when actually they're not making a profit. And so it's pointless making more sales. So an exact example here, a construction business that I worked with doing about 2.5 million in revenue, profit margins were very thin, kind of less than 5%. And so they said, when I first started working with them, we need to make more sales. We need to do more projects, more jobs, and that will get us out of this. They're also in a cash flow crunch, as well as obviously not making much in terms of profit. They said more deals will get us out of this situation. And I sort of said to them, how will that help? And they said, because if we do more deals, then we'll make more profit, and that will make the situation better. And I sort of said to them, okay, yeah, that's kind of true, but what have you got to do to get more projects or more jobs? And they said, well, we just need to invest more in marketing. And I said, okay, if you invest more in marketing, then yes, you're going to get more jobs. But on the jobs themselves, how much are you making in profit? And they said, we don't know. We just know what our net profit margin is, because that's what you just told us. And I said, okay, so on each job, how do you actually know that you're making a profit that's in line with your competitors and what you should be making in order to make a decent profit margin at the end of the day? And they essentially said that they don't know. And so what we realized when we went further into the numbers was that their profit margin was actually nowhere near high enough versus their competitors. And so we worked on understanding what was driving that profit margin and working out how we can get them back up to a level where they were in line with their competitors. And actually in that exact situation, what was happening was they were pricing the jobs on what they believed was a high enough gross profit margin, and it was.
Mm-hmm.
But what was happening was that when the projects finished, they were coming in at a much higher cost than they estimated because they weren't accounting for all the costs up front. Okay, so that became a case of us getting more clear on what those costs were, making sure that we were including them all in the project costing. They can still continue pricing the jobs in the same way they are, but just we're including all the costs. So at the end of the day, the gross profit's going to be higher, and therefore the net profit's going to be higher. So that's what we did there. But with construction in general, the three main problems are cash. And I'm yet to meet a construction or trade business that doesn't face all three of these problems. It's cash flow, and then it's low profit margins because they're competing on price with the other construction and trade business owners. And then the third one is not knowing how much money they're going to make on each project until after the project's complete.
I think construction for me, I would say it's one of the largest source of works that we see. I'm actually sitting down to do an interview with a firm who does data analysis around insolvencies, quite a big firm, and we're going to talk for an hour about construction. I mean, that's how it was bad pre-2020, and then costs going through the roof. Eastern Europeans, not as many Eastern Europeans come in, which made a huge impact on the labour force. And people entering fixed price contracts 3 years ago, and like that, it's been brutal. I mean, and it's. I don't want to be I like to have good news, me. I just can't see any at the moment. I mean, we know that there are talks of some real big players that are going to collapse. We had ISG collapse last year, which just decimates the supply chain. And I think the problem for a lot of construction owners is they get this contract, and let's even say there's a 25% margin in there. What they're not factoring in is the client's going to batter them at the end for that 25%. So they've worked the balls off throughout the project, only to get stiffed at the end. It's a real tough game to be in.
Certainly is. Yeah. And to be honest, there's no quick fix. But what we can do, the whole way through that process, from start to job to the end of any job, the business owner is driving blind. What we can do is give them more clarity so that they can sleep better at night, and so that they can make better decisions and not spend the cash that's in their bank account, because we have the clarity and we know that cash needs to be reserved to pay for payroll next week, or to fund any upcoming expenses that we need to pay for. And so whilst we might not be able to control everything that's going on in the broader economy, and general trends of patterns of behavior that happen in certain industries, we can control what's in the business owner's control, and that's helping them understand where they are with the numbers, and then use that information to make better decisions with what we've got.
It sort of leads me on to a question I wanted to ask is, like, what does a part-time CFO actually do? How will you shift the game for a growing business, or perhaps even more importantly, shift the game for a business that might be facing those pressures that you've just talked about? Let's get into it. What's the first thing you do? What do you look for? What are some solutions?
Yeah, good question. So the job of a fractional CFO is the same job of a CFO at any large business. Kind of the underlying thing that they're doing is fundamentally the same. So the job of a CFO at any business, Amazon, Apple, or a small construction business in London, is firstly to make sure the business stays healthy. So what does that mean? Business staying healthy essentially means that it's got enough cash. It's not going to run out of cash. That's number one. Number two is, okay, we're not going to collapse, and we're going to stay in business because we've got enough cash. Number two is, how do we make a profit so that we can give money back to the business owners or the shareholders. And with that objective, we then need to guide the business owner or the MD or the CEO on what they need to do and how they implement the strategy into the business so that those projections and possibilities come to fruition. And that's really the job. So in terms of what I do with my clients, the process is fundamentally the same, whatever the industry. But to start with, it's understanding what that business owner wants. Where do they want to go with the business? For some, that they want to sell in 3 years or 5 years, they want to scale from 5 million to 50 million and then do a big exit at the end. For others, they're happy, at the 3 to 5 million mark, and they just want to sustain the lifestyle that they've got. So it's getting clear on what that looks like for them. And then it's doing a deep dive into the business and understanding what the lay of the land is at the moment. So is the business having any cash flow issues? Is it well capitalized? And we set targets for this year, given we now know the kind of long-term targets of the business owner. So based on those targets, we turn those into financial targets for this year, so that if we achieve our targets this year, we'll be on track to achieving that long-term objective. Okay, so we have revenue and profit and cash flow targets for this year. And I break them down into those 16 drivers of the business. So we actually have more targets than that, but fundamentally it comes down to revenue, profit, and cash flow. Okay, and then we work out where it looks like we're headed. So we create a forecast, or I create a forecast. So then we have a target and we have a forecast. Now, the target and the forecast usually don't match. The forecast is usually either ahead of the target or it's below the target for each one of those 16 drivers. Okay, so then we can see which areas of the business are on track or off track, and we can identify what we need to focus on improving so that the business stays healthy, objective number one. And number two, the business owner is on track to achieving their long-term objectives from the business, which means taking money home usually.
Really, really interesting points there. How regularly should a business owner be checking this information? How regularly do you do it with your clients?
So it's a monthly process. So it's once a month. So after the books have been closed out for the prior month, they're then ready to do this review.
I'm going to come in here, right? And I love what you've said so far. There'll be people watching this of varying different sizes, and they'll be saying to themselves, my accountant doesn't do this for me. This is all new information. And I'm not here to knock accountants. I'm really not. What I try and do is educate directors of what to ask their accountants and what services they need. Because a lot of what you've said, and I've been in business since I was 25. It took me a long time to learn what you've just said. It took me a long time to understand numbers, and like you, when I was able to understand the basics, I slept better at night. So, what's your view on what I've just said? Why is an accountant not doing this? What are the problems? How can we educate? We obviously want directors to pick the phone up to you if they're a good fit for what you're looking for, which we'll come into. But some general principles. Why is there so much misconception around what an accountant does?
So to be honest, I don't know why there's a misconception, but to me it's pretty clear. An accountant's job, by definition, when a business owner appoints an accountant, what they're usually appointing them to help them with is to file their accounts and tell them how much tax they've got to pay at the end of the year. That's the accountant's job. And a lot of accountants do a really, really good job of that. But the accountant's job is not to help you understand your numbers, help you improve your cash flow, and help you make more money. It's just not their job. So the accountant takes what's happened in the past, and they turn it into a story that can be filed with HMRC, and to make sure that you're legally compliant and you're filing everything you need to file and you're paying the right amount of tax. That's their job. Okay, so that usually happens once a year, and it will happen a certain amount of time after the end of your financial year. So let's say 3 to 6 months on average. Okay, so by the time you look at that, sometimes the accountant will do a call with you as well. Well, usually they'll do a call with you just to run through the numbers. Okay, but by the time you have that call, you're 3 to 6 months out of date.
It's useless information, really, isn't it, to actually run the business?
Yeah, and so the accountant will explain to you the profits of the business and therefore how much tax you've got to pay. But very rarely will they explain this was your revenue, this was your gross profit, and this is what happened from a cash flow perspective. And this is where you need to focus on improving. Otherwise, this could happen. And these are the problem areas of the business because that's not their job. And actually, I'm very good friends with an accountant who does this for their clients. And they were saying to me the other day, actually, that they would actually like my help, helping them grow their accounting practice, which is quite ironic, given that most people think their accountants are in it to help them improve their revenue.
That is the easiest and simplest explanation I've ever had, because I ask this a lot to my guests, and you're right, it's just not their job, is it? It's like,
no. And so I said that
remote.
I actually said that's really interesting that you'd like my help with that. And she said yeah, because at accounting school we're not taught how to think looking forward. We're not taught strategy. We're taught how to do journal entries and credits and debits and understand what's happened and make sense of them. But the strategy piece is a completely different skill set. And so, yeah, hopefully that answers the question. Lots of accountants, or some accountants, do offer fractional FD services. And some of them, I'm sure, are really good. And some of them probably not, because like I said, it is a different skill set.
It's it's a great answer. So sort of following on to that, when you walk into a new business, and you've touched on this already, what are the first 3 numbers you will look at and why?
So first I'll look at cash, and then I'll work out what's coming in or going out over the next few months. Is the business healthy? Is it solvent? Is it liquid? That's number one, objective number one. And sometimes that's easier than other times because the books are inevitably in differing states of being accurate. And so I have to do the best with what I've got, because sometimes they'll have a bookkeeper that hasn't been doing the job properly, or sometimes it'll be a close relation of the business owner's partner, or a business owner's relative, and that person may or may not be trained as a bookkeeper. So you never really know what state the books are going to be in. And this applies not just to sub £1 million or dollar businesses, but all the way up to 10, 15 million pounds or dollars in revenue. So that's objective number one, is to, using the information I've got, what can I decipher about the performance of the business and how the business is currently doing? Most of the time, I don't have perfect numbers, but as long as they're directionally accurate, I can just get a gauge of where things are at. And then if there's some sort of bookkeeping cleanup that needs to be done in order for us to make really sound financial decisions going forward, then I will guide the business owner on what needs to be done there. So it might be appointing a new bookkeeper. It might be just going through line by line and telling the bookkeeper what's kind of wrong so far. And we want to get that up to scratch, but that's not kind of an urgent thing. And the urgent thing is, like I said earlier, about the main objectives of a CFO or an FD. Make sure the business is healthy, it's not going to collapse, got enough cash. And then number 2, what do we do with the information we've got to guide the business owner on what needs to happen to improve profits and cash flow?
Now, obviously, our end of things is we support businesses through insolvencies. Most of the inquiries we take, thankfully, don't result in an insolvency. They just need some advisory as to what to do and what not to do, with an aim of actually avoiding calling us back and going, okay, we really do need your services now. So what are the subtle signs that a business is heading towards some quite serious trouble?
Yeah, good question. Okay, cash balance is on a downward spiral. Accounts payable is much higher than the current cash balance and accounts receivable. Those are the main things, really. It all comes down to cash and what's coming up. And so again, back to the books. Sometimes the books will be in a really tidy state, and you can decipher that information just by looking at them once and pulling a balance sheet. If everything's accurate, you can identify that pretty quickly. But very often the accounts won't actually include all the accounts payable, and the accounts receivable may or may not be up to date. So you need to have a conversation with the business owner and just get a really clear picture of what's coming in and going out of the business over the next 30 to 60 days or up to 90 days. And so what I do there is I actually have a very simple cash flow forecast, which is the 13-week cash flow forecast. And it's so simple.
We can drop that in the show notes here as well, because it's available to anyone, isn't it?
Yeah, anyone can have that. So it's very simple. All we're doing is making a list of everything coming into the business and everything going out of the business. And we look at today's bank account balance, and then we work out what the bank account balance is expected to be once in a 1 month, 2 month, 3 months. And then we can see a trend of what's likely to happen to that balance. And that helps us manage that situation. And then this is all well and good, but it's just a starting point. It's like having a dashboard to look at the numbers. Then we need to work out what to do, which is the most important part. What do we do with that information? So if it looks like things are going to carry on going downhill, what do we do? And that's where it comes down to working out kind of the 2 or 3 top things that we can do today, right now, to actually manage that situation and improve it.
Why do you think so many directors bury their head in the sands when it comes to numbers?
I think it comes back to the point that I mentioned earlier, in that business owners very often are not numbers people. I really think that's what it comes down to. And so managing cash flow, managing profitability is not something that comes naturally to them. They're experts at what they do, and they want to carry on focusing on the thing that they're experts at. And for some, especially the creative types, kind of interior designers, or I had a few interior designers, architects, the thought of actually looking at the numbers gives them anxiety. And so when the business owner feels that way about the numbers, it's no surprise that so many find themselves in these sorts of situations.
Yeah, I mean, some of us, we're just wired up differently, aren't we? And I suppose that it sort of hammers home the point, doesn't it? Is if you're not wired like that, that's absolutely fine. But you've got to have someone there who can complement the bits you're not good at. And I think getting out to people that you can have this fractional CFO position, it's not going to cost them the earth either, is it? I mean, it's all relative to what you have to do. But can we give an idea of what a business would need to spend on something like this to have somebody coming in to offer this type of service? And of course, I know that can be how long is a piece of string, but what's the starting point?
Yeah, so it really does vary on exactly what they need help with, and kind of where they're at in their journey, and the size of the business and that sort of thing. But generally speaking, anywhere from about 800 quid a month up to about 5-6 grand. That's quite a big range, I know.
but from my point, let's say we starting point from £800. Like, we've got to get directors into the mindset that this is not a cost. It's an investment in your business, especially if you're one of those directors who isn't good with numbers, because everything, that finance function, should drive every decision. And it sort of brings me on to my next question is, you posted recently about chaos to clarity. And I wanted to get it in words. What is that journey like in real life? Chaos to clarity. What happens? If you could even share some experiences with us, that'd be really helpful.
Yeah, certainly. So I think an analogy that I like, which I think I read it somewhere else, actually. It's not actually my idea. But imagine playing in a football match or rugby match or golf or whatever sport you're into, and not having any idea what the score is. You've got no idea. Okay, so you're literally playing blind. Like, you have no idea what's going on. Okay, so that's step one, is we don't know what's going on. And then step two is okay, how do we see what's working and not working based on the score and what's going on? Okay, well, we don't know that. We're guessing. We don't know what's working, not working. It's gut feeling. You've seen someone, miss a few shots at goal, and so you reckon that's the thing that's not working properly. But you don't know because you haven't got any stats behind it. And then the third thing is the strategy and the forward-looking stuff. So what do we do next? Okay, if it's 1-1 in the World Cup final, you're going to do something slightly differently. You're going to take more or less risk than you would if you were 3-0 up in the first round of something, right? So it's a
I
complete.
love football analogies. You are on my page. Yeah.
I'm not a footballer. I'm not actually into football, but I do know. I know the basics. Obviously, everyone does. So that's the analogy, right? So if you apply that same logic to businesses and a business owner, the confusion and the lack of clarity that they're going through when they've got so much going on and they're not focusing on the numbers leads to them. What I usually find is that they focus on doing what they know best, and they ignore the one thing that they actually need to look at to work out what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And then the problem doesn't get identified and it gets left ignored. And the business owner is focusing on everything else except for the problem that needs to be focused on and addressed because they're afraid to look at it. And they don't really want to know what the answer is because they don't want to do that thing anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And then the business gets neglected and then opportunities get missed. Okay, so when I say don't scale chaos, it could be chaos in the business owner's mind, or it could just be a team which has no organization, no process, no systems, and everyone just kind of guessing on any given day.
And what does clarity look like?
So clarity looks like, I'm biased, obviously, but clarity means knowing where you're at financially at any given point in time or any given month at least, and then having a system where you can see what's working and what's not working in the business, and then you be able to use that information to drive the strategy of the team. And this is actually something that I learned at JP Morgan. We would have a weekly team meeting, and it was my job actually at the time to create a dashboard for the team meeting, and the dashboard contained, let's say, 20 data points on it. And it was my job to go around finding all those data points, getting the right data, putting them into the dashboard. And then that dashboard drove the team meeting. So the managing director of the team, he would look at the dashboard and basically go through at a high level where we're at. Sometimes it was me that would go through that summary because I was the one that put the dashboard together. And then from that overview, he was able to work out where we needed to focus our attention. So what was working and what was not working. Okay, we set these budgets and these forecasts for the year, and so far we're at X. That's not good enough, or that is good enough. What do we need to focus on next? And that then drove the rest of the meeting, which was, okay, as a team, there are 7 of us. What are we doing? What are we not doing? Who is doing what, so that we can get this number back on track, or that we can keep this number on track. And that is exactly the same process I implement with my clients. And so whether anyone decides to work with me or not, I think what it comes down to is just having a system that works for you, where you can know the score. You can know where the business is currently at every month. And so the easiest thing to do is to go into your QuickBooks or your Xero or your accounting software and just pull management reports, pull the numbers. And I know it's a different language to many business owners, but just try and understand what's going on and spend 20 minutes a month going through what has happened. And if you repeat that process every month, you will start to understand what is driving the business and what is causing those numbers to change. And so that's step one. The quick win for any business owner is do that. If you're not doing it already, of course. And then step two is to kind of go a step further and actually use that to drive your decision making and have a process for making that happen. Okay. And there are, you can go into the advanced stuff where you start manipulating the numbers and doing all sorts of analysis. But I think for most business owners, I reckon 80% of business owners, they could make a significant improvement to the way they feel about their business and therefore the actions that they take in their business just by following that process.
One of my questions, funnily enough, were sort of what dashboards and reports should people be looking at and sort of, looking at without fail. So you just answered that question perfectly. And like the basic level, they can pull off a P&L and a balance sheet from Zero or QuickBooks, and that'll give them, as long as it's up to date and somebody's putting in the information accurately, that'll be a good starting point.
Yeah. So again, let's keep it simple. Financial statements were created by accountants for accountants. And okay, maybe the research analysts and the bankers in the city, but apart from that, they weren't designed for business owners to understand them. So it's no surprise that business owners don't understand them. So let's keep this simple. We're going to track four numbers: revenue, gross profit, net profit, cash. That's it. Four numbers. You track them every month, and then you look at what's changing and what's not changing, and what's getting better and what's getting worse. That's it.
I think so many directors they're so busy doing. And I've a lot of experience with this is when you let's say we get a call and it's one of those calls where they don't need an insolvency. They can fight their way through. It's a short-term cash flow, but you can see when you're talking to them, it's like one of the things that we want to see straight away is, well, can you pull us off some management information? Oh, well, it's last set of accounts for 2023. Well, have you got anything else? No, I haven't got anything. And one of the things that we try and get people into the rhythm of is after they've had a call with us is listen, you'll get through this. You need to perhaps speak to HMRC, agree a time to pay arrangement, communicate with creditors, just let them know what's happening. But we want them to start getting information. We want them to start running that monthly profit and loss. And the worry that they have is they're in such a mess. They think this is going to take, they just feel like they're so far away from what you call clarity, Tom. So how long is this going to take? To get from chaos to clarity. My advice is always bring someone else in. If you can bring someone into the team that knows what they're doing, how painless a process can this be?
Obviously, it varies on the situation they're currently in as to how painless it can be. But I think if you're struggling, just get some help. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to pay someone like me. Just get some help from someone in your network, family, friends, who understands numbers and can help, and who would be an objective opinion to just help you understand what's going on. You don't need to ask them on the strategy of your business or anything like that. Just if clarity is something that you're struggling with, just try and understand what you might need to get clarity. And then from there, you can take action and work with someone. For me, again, I'm biased because I know that clarity or lack of clarity always stems from not having clarity over the numbers. And so the starting point for me would be understanding revenue, gross profit, net profit, cash, those four numbers, seeing what's happened to them over time. And then if we're in a difficult situation, then working out what needs to happen to get us out of that situation. So back to the point I made before, getting that 13-week cash flow forecast in place so we can see what's coming in and what's going out, and so that we have some idea of what's about to happen. And then once you know where the business is currently at from the dashboard and you know what's coming from the forecast, what more clarity could you need? So, yeah.
Who's a good client for you? What are you looking for? Who, if you could have a wish list of the perfect client that you want to take on and start working with, what do they look like?
A business that is making money. So 4 to 10 million in that range. They're healthy profit margins and they want to grow. They're my favorite businesses to work with. And I get energized working with them because the business owners are, they want to do the work. They just want a bit of support in helping them get there. And I feel energized when I work with these types of business owners. So one that I just recently started working with, they are an FX broker in London, in the city. They're doing about 500K in EBITDA, and they've done really well to get the business to the point it's currently at. But they wanted support in how they grow it from here. And they sort of said, right, we don't know what we're missing. We don't know what to do next. We think we need to make new hires. We think we need to invest in marketing. We don't know what to invest in. We don't know how much we can afford to invest. We don't know when those investments are going to pay off. And so what I'm helping them do is essentially plan and model out all those different scenarios so that we can use that information, we can use the data to make better decisions. And that's what it all comes down to. Everything I've been talking about here boils down to us using the information, using the data we've got, so we can make better decisions, so that we're not guessing, so we're not making decisions based on how we feel or our gut or the bank balance. And so, that particular example, I did some analysis on their trading data, and what I found was that over the last, I'll change the numbers slightly, but over the last year or so, they had done a significant number of trades that were below kind of their minimum threshold, because they have to pay a fee on each trade, and so they actually lost more than 10,000-20,000 on those trades. And so that was a very quick win, pretty much since we started working together, that we could go in there and say, right, from now on, any trades that are going to generate less than X in commission, you either just add that commission on to the client, you add your minimum fee onto the client, or you don't do the trade. And that's instantly, like I said, tens of thousands back in their pocket. And so that's the type of analysis that that's a quick win. And it's a short-term, well, it's not a short-term strategy, but it's a quick win, low-hanging fruit in terms of adding more to the bottom line.
Just changing tack slowly, because we're going to start to wrap up the interview. What's your thoughts on work-life balance?
For small business owners, I think the reality is that to build a business, you have to go through periods of hard work, and in that period, over those periods, you're gonna face a lot of stress. I think that's the reality. I think the idea of building a business and not facing any stress and not having to make sacrifices is unrealistic. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's a case of managing it, working out what your priorities are, and doing the best you can with the constraints that you've got. I think that's what it comes down to. And not being too hard on yourself. Like, if you've got kids and your priority is to pick the kids up from school, I don't have kids myself yet, but if that's the priority, then that's fine. You can't be annoyed at yourself or feel bad that you couldn't work for 12 hours every day because you prioritize picking the kids up. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that.
What's the best bit of advice someone's given you?
Best bit of advice, generally, or with
whatever you want to share with us.
Yeah, I think it's probably, this is one that gets floated around a lot in various different forms, but consistency and the magic of compounding. And I mean that from a skills perspective. We all, myself included, want to see instant results. We do something for 6 months and we expect things to be magically taking off in our business, for example. And we might be making brilliant progress because, around us, we see people who seem to be making, getting instant results from doing very little work. Whether that's true or not, who knows? It probably is true for a very small percentage. But for most, there's a time lag between when you start and consistently the time in before you start seeing results. And so I think it was either Alex Hormozy or perhaps in the book The Psychology of Money, it talks about...
Love Alex Hormozy. Absolutely love listening to him.
Yeah. He talked about, essentially, if you look at successful people, one of the common themes is that they've consistently put in work over the years, not over 6 months, 12 months, 1 year, 2 years, but over 30 years, 40 years, 50 years. And as you continue to consistently put in work over the years, the amount that you gain from one additional year after 50 years is exponential compared to what you gain from doing, say, a year at the beginning. And actually, I think it was one of Daniel Priestley's interviews with Stephen Bartlett. They talked about this. I don't think they have.
I've watched both of those interviews. Fantastic. Please, people, go and watch them.
And Stephen Bartlett highlighted that I can't remember the exact stats, but in the last 6 months of his podcast, the amount of followers that they've added is exponentially higher than the amount that they added over the first kind of 2 or 3 years of the podcast being in existence. And so I think that highlights and sinks back in nicely with the point that I was making. Essentially, it doesn't matter if we don't see results over a short term. If we're consistent and we know the direction that we're going in and we keep working towards that, then over the long term, that, you know, the results are going to compound.
Our YouTube channel, we started to do videos on insolvency in 2020. Like, people laughed at us. It was like no one did it back then. We do have a few copycats now, which is absolutely fine. And no one watched them. Like, no one watched them. And we had 250,000 views on our YouTube channel last month.
Wow.
Which is incredible. Like we can't believe it, you know. And it's, I was always one who would overestimate what I'd do in 12 months and vastly underestimate what we could achieve in 5 years. So that's some, really stellar advice. That Tom, what is the best book you've ever? What's the best book? Podcast, film? What's the one thing that you would advise a director to go out and read, watch, or listen to after this?
For a director, I would recommend Traction.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've never heard of that one before.
Traction. I actually can't remember who writes it. I believe it's Gino.
Okay.
Something. It talks about the EOS method. Are you familiar with the EOS method?
No.
Okay, so it's a method for managing your business, and basically, it's kind of a forward-looking strategy, implementing actions across your whole actions and objectives across your whole team, and it all starts with kind of setting values for the organization. So yeah, I'd recommend any business owner. The E-Myth is another good one that I'd recommend to any business owner. And then if you're looking for something a bit more, well, I would say fictional, but it's not. It's a real life fictional story. Shoe Dog.
Shoe Dog's class. Yeah, really enjoyed that. Tom, you've been a great guest. Like, really helpful. I've learned stuff from you today. If people want to find out more about you, where do they find you?
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn. I'm also on my website. You can book a call with me directly through my website. I give a few things away. So I give away the cash flow forecast that I've talked about, the report that highlights the 16 drivers of any business. And then I'm also in the process of building out a dashboard, which I'm also going to give away for free. So if anyone is interested in any of that, or they just want to have a chat about how they're doing with their business, then feel free to get in touch, and I'd love to talk to you.
Tom, thank you for your time, mate. You've been a great guest. All the best. God bless you, mate.
Thank you for having me, Chris.